Saying yes is one of the earliest skills that most professionals learn. It's how you're seen as helpful, capable, and eager. Early in your career, it's often rewarded. You say yes, you learn faster, you build trust, and you get exposure. For a long time, that strategy works until it doesn't. At higher levels, saying yes reflexively becomes one of the most common reasons strong leaders stall. Not because saying yes itself is bad, but because indiscriminate yesing signals a lack of judgment. And judgment is what leadership roles are actually testing for. There's an unspoken shift that happens as you move up. Leaders are no longer evaluated on how much you can take on. They're evaluated on how well they can prioritize, protect quality, and make trade-offs under pressure. When you keep saying yes to everything, you may think you're demonstrating commitment. What you may actually be demonstrating is an inability or an unwillingness to be decisive. So the danger of saying yes too often is subtle. It rarely shows up as one single failure. Instead, it shows up as this erosion of your credibility and your maturity over time. Your best work gets diluted because your attention is spread thin. Your priorities become unclear to others because you're showing that everything is equally important. And your credibility weakens if delivery quality slips. Not dramatically, but even just enough to notice. Perhaps most importantly, though, leadership stops seeing you as someone who can be trusted with scope. If you can't say no to small things, how will you say no when you have more to do, a bigger team, or when the stakes are higher? One of the biggest myths in professional life is that saying yes keeps you safe, because in reality, it often does the opposite. Leaders want to know the people they promote can protect the business from overcommitment. They want people who understand capacity, not just personal capacity if you feel like pulling all-nighters, but organizational capacity. When you say yes without context, you absorb risk silently, and then when things break, you take the blame for being overstretched instead of being recognized for poor scoping, which of course is also a problem. Many people who struggle with boundaries tell themselves a familiar story. If I say no, I'll look difficult. If I say no, I'll miss out. If I say no, someone else will get this opportunity. And some of that may be true depending on how you say it. But what's usually missing from the story is the reality that every yes is a no to something else, just not one you're constantly choosing. When you say yes to everything, you're saying no to depth, to strategic work, to thinking time, to recovery, and often to the work that actually would move your career forward. Another reason saying yes becomes dangerous is that it can lock you in to an execution identity where you're always the worker and never the owner. If you're always available to pick things up, fix problems, or fill gaps, the organization learns something about you. That this person is great at absorbing work. That's useful, of course, but is it leadership? No. Leaders are known for making work possible, not for personally carrying it. If you are constantly the one stepping in, you may be preventing others from stepping up and preventing yourself from being seen as someone who can operate through others, who can lead teams, who can empower people. Learning to say no doesn't mean becoming rigid or uncooperative. It means becoming intentional and bringing people through your thought process. Effective no saying is rarely a blunt refusal, it's reframing. It sounds like, if I take this on, X will slip. Is that the right trade-off? Or, given current priorities, here's what I can do well right now. Or, this is important. Can we align on where it sits relative to these other commitments? These responses do a few things simultaneously. First, they signal judgment. Second, they surface constraints that perhaps should be surfaced anyway. And third, they invite a decision instead of making one unilaterally. That is leadership behavior, and you don't sound like you're whining about it. One of the most important moments to practice this skill is when work shows up without context. Many people say yes because they don't want to slow things down. But asking for context isn't resistance, it's responsibility if you want to make the right choices, get the right people involved, focus on the right goals, and do the highest quality work. So instead of just saying yes, ask, what problem are we solving? What does success look like? Who's accountable for the outcome? And what happens if we don't do this now? These questions don't make you difficult, they make you thoughtful. And again, they will allow you, if you do say yes, to produce better quality outcomes. Another place yesing causes harm is when it's driven by fear. Fear of layoffs, fear of being seen as replaceable, fear of being a disappointment. In uncertain environments, people often say yes to everything as a form of self-protection. But ironically, this often increases risk, and it becomes unclear what your job really is. Also, when you take on too much, quality drops. And when quality drops, trust erodes. And when trust erodes, the very security you were trying to protect gets more and more fragile. Leaders don't retain people because they're endlessly agreeable and they can run around picking up scraps. They retain people because they can be relied on to make good decisions, especially, when those decisions are uncomfortable or when they have to be made in the face of ambiguity. Saying no strategically also protects your team. When leaders say yes without thinking, the cost often gets pushed downward. Teams inherit unrealistic timelines, unclear priorities, and conflicting demands. Over time, this creates burnout, disengagement, and turnover. If you're responsible for others, you need to be shielding them because your yes carries more weight than you think. Saying no at the right time and explaining why is often an act of leadership, not selfishness. Remember that opportunities are not evenly weighted. Not every project moves your career forward. Not every project is the right thing for your team. Not every project or request builds the right set of skills. Some work keeps you busy. Other work actually allows you to grow your leverage. So if you don't differentiate between the two, you'll be perpetually full and perpetually stuck in place. A useful exercise is to periodically ask yourself 3 questions. First, which work is most aligned with where I want to go? Second, which work is visible to the people who influence decisions? And third, which work could someone else do with guidance? So your yeses should cluster around those answers, and there may be times when you say yes because it's something you're going to delegate and use it as an opportunity to empower others. But keep it tied to the business so that whichever your answer is, it reduces tension. Making the decision may feel uncomfortable, but your leadership requires a tolerance for that discomfort. And if you want to grow, you have to be willing to disappoint people occasionally and temporarily in order to deliver what actually matters. What's most important if you are saying no or you're asking clarifying questions to get to an answer is that you're explaining your thought process and that ultimately when you say yes, you're doing it on purpose. Because when you do that, your work gets better, your credibility strengthens, and your career stops drifting or sinking under the weight of other people's priorities.